Welcome back for video 4, and I'm now predicting that I'm just going to talk until I'm out of videos. So that's the new plan. But yeah, so we were talking about this image and the stories behind it. A good place to start for me, because I think this is the strongest, or maybe the second strongest image when it comes to narrative and in the amount of things going on. And that's because this is it's a scene I took a lot of time on. As I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, I did spend a lot of time preparing this image and planning it. It's one of the images I really wanted to make sure I portrayed correctly. And so this is this one was a bit of a labor of love. But yeah, so as you can tell, the party that we are used to has been ambushed, and they are returning a bit of fire. And so how this fight is unfolding and the sort of things that are happening before and immediately after it are things I wanted to capture in this image, and I think I did a really good job. The hints and stuff like that that we have for this fight are basically the arrows have been lit on fire. You can kind of tell that this is an ambush, first of all, because we know I would have drawn the smoke based off these guns have both been fired and they've created significant smoke clouds, whereas these braziers, which have just been lit and are flaring quite high because they've taken the dry tinder, it's a big fire that's just started, they haven't made smoke clouds yet, so these have been lit in the last couple seconds. So what happens here is that these braziers are lit as they're approaching, and these people sort of see that. Maybe they turn, as you could assume this guy was facing a different direction previously, and they turn to sort of look, and as they turn, a volley of arrows slams into them. The first 4 arrows, as there were 4 people with bows and arrows, hit this guy's shoulder, this guy's stomach, this board when it's right there, and the motor. The way you can tell all this is, first of all, these guys are bleeding, but this is a slightly older wound, and this flame is one of the biggest we see on the boat, so you can tell that these arrows hit first, this one and this one. Then this one, the flame is also spread quite far, but the board's over here. What would have happened for this one is that it slams into the boat here, this guy sees it, grabs the board it's on, turns it, and puts it behind his back for cover, at which point he grabs his gun, turns back, looks, and shoots. They would have been moving forwards this entire time, but they probably wouldn't have been moving as fast as they are now, so the boat's been revved up a bit. It would have accelerated, and either because they were accelerating or because they were suddenly wary, the second volley of arrows wasn't as good. One of the shot, this guy had turned up after, with his shoulder wound, leading on this pole, shoots, and that startles one of the archers, probably this man who's, you know, not really in good form, whereas this guy's getting ready to knock an arrow. And so the second volley, an arrow hits here, missing this guy's legs. After he shoots, however, one of the other archers, either one of these two or this fellow, hits this man in the eye. I'm assuming it's one of the people up in the trees here, because his head wouldn't have been turned for that if he wouldn't have been looking forwards and then had his head facing that way if he was hit by the arrow. So he was looking off at one of those guys, but just trying to get down, and he's hit in the eye. Then another one of the people up in the trees here sends an arrow careening over this guy's head. And so there's 6 arrows that have been fired by these 4 archers. 2 of them are a little bit slower. It's this fellow who's startled and this fellow who's, you know, I guess he's just taking a sweet time or something. And our explorers are returning fire. That's basically what's happening, but the reason I like this so much is because I think it's a great collection of... Because what really motivated me for this one was the idea that I could have a... You can see they were drinking tea before this, they were probably having a lovely conversation. The teapot's knocked over, whereas none of the teacups are, so the teacup was probably on this board when it was yanked up and used as cover. That's why it's been knocked over. And so there's a lot of little things in this image that I had a lot of fun planning out, and yeah, I think it's one of the better ones for me. I also really like the way the lighting is balanced out. I changed the lighting a lot for the finalized version, so you might have noticed. Oh, sorry about that. So yeah, I changed the lighting a lot in the finalized version, making all the trees and adding a moon, or making all the trees a little bit brighter and adding a moon, as well as putting a little bit more diversity in the stars. And so this image was it's probably one of the best in the series for just like technical accomplishment. I also like the variety of foliage, and I like the I like the still frame that I got here. I like it. So, moving right along. The next image I actually drew in the series was this one, but this isn't the next image that happens in accordance to the story. The next image for that is the one that I based off our colorful image that we saw earlier in the series, and it's this one. Back when I drew that colorful image, I was starting to think of the story, and as I mentioned earlier, I went directly into Explorer 4, or the meeting photo after this. So when I was drawing this, I thought it'd be really good to include it, and basically I went back to that colored image and I just made it black and white and then redid the lighting a bit. I made this area darker and I added a moon and changed the stars so they showed up better in black and white, that sort of thing. But as far as the narrative goes, I think this is a pretty important image because it's slightly hinted at in the image before it with our friends fighting the natives, or the savages, or whatever you want to call them. In this image, you can finally see our white coat friend. He's a little bit more glum than he has been before, and he's looking over the body, or now body, as the of his friend. He's taken his shirt off to help use it as a bandage. The bandaging doesn't really come across because this guy was already wearing a striped shirt. That was a little bit of a mistake on my part. But yeah, he's tried to bandage this guy, and he's taken account of the weapons. There's a lot of things here that are displeasing him. And this image sort of breaks the pattern of our explorer always being the most lower left. Like, he is in the lower left quadrant, but he is not the most lower and left figure. And that to me was sort of showing where his priorities are. He's not paying attention to his very dwindling party with their excessively low resources. He's only focusing on his adventure and on his goals, and he's being very greedy. Another thing we can see in this image is that the boat has taken a lot of little arrows on the way out. So, they've collected up 3 arrows or so. There's still one stuck in the boat here, the stem of one stuck there. There's a lot of burn marks, as well as a cut on the side of the boat that wasn't there previously. It's probably from the man with the hole in his stomach sort of going forwards and stabbing at the boat in violent rage. And all of that's just sort of a wear and tear thing that I was adding in. One thing I really like about this image is this little shrine. I tried drawing this shrine a couple months before I started this, and it never really looked right. I never got the geometry right, and so I revisited it with a lot of devotion for this image. And I love the way it turned out. I think this is one of the nicest little environments. This little stream going down and the waterfall. I like the geometry of this section too. It's one of the prettier ones. This is when I posted this on the internet, this was one of the best received pictures I put out. So yeah, a lot of people like this one too. It's very well received. Oh, but yeah. So after our sailor dockhand worker takes an arrow in the shoulder, the crew goes on to this sort of scene. It's a temple, middle of the night, and there's a moon up here. I've already talked about this one, but I mentioned that I didn't have to change much for the finalized version. This is the difference between the finalized and non-finalized versions. The only things I changed were adding a teacup there, adding this guy's fur collar back on because I forgot my jacket had a fur collar, and changing this guy's badge. This was around the time where I figured out the narrative as well as figured out how to make my images, so I was putting them out every 3 or 4 days. And yeah, there's a few things here that are just reconfirming what we already saw in the last image, but we're also introducing what was in the box, being a frying pan, some maps, and a shovel head. This guy's taking off the only gun we see left in the image. The rifle, as I previously mentioned, probably didn't have much ammunition left, so I think that's his reasoning. The other gun was dead weight. He's taking off the only one left. He pretty obviously owned the guns because he was taking specific inventory on them, and he's always been the one standing around him. And these guys aren't really willing to fight him over it because he has a gun and they don't. The girl at this point, I think she's starting to realize this man she's traveling with is not a very good leader and not someone she should look up to. And so her head's turned away and she doesn't respect him as much anymore. But that's a topic for the next video.